My name is Rachel Moore. I was born 4 minutes after my twin sister, Hannah, and apparently those 4 minutes made all the difference in the eyes of our parents, Charles and Elizabeth Moore. Hannah and I are twins, but to them, it seemed there was only one real daughter. And alas, it wasn't me. From my earliest childhood, I noticed the difference in how they treated us. Hannah always got the newest, prettiest, and most desirable things. She got the dolls, while I got the ones the neighbors' kids gave me. She got new dresses, while I wore hand-me-downs. When Hannah cried, my mother dropped everything to comfort her, hug her, and soothe her. But when I tripped and scraped my knee, all I heard was, "You're a strong girl, Rachel. Be patient." I was handed a paper napkin and sent off to play again. As a child, I began to understand that to be noticed, I had to do something extraordinary. After all, no one noticed my tears for no reason. I remember one vivid moment from that time when I was about 5 years old. Hannah and I were playing in the yard, and she wanted to climb a tall metal structure on the playground, but got scared and started crying. I was scared too, but I climbed up and jumped off to show her it was okay, hoping my parents would praise my courage. Instead, Dad ran up, hugged Hannah, and told her she was a brave girl, even though she didn't even try to climb. He glanced at me and muttered quietly, "Be careful, Rachel. You know you can hurt yourself." And that was it. No pride, no approval. That moment became the pattern of our relationship for years to come. The more I tried to prove I deserved attention, the more indifferent they became. But Hannah could smile or do something trivial, and my parents would shower her with praise. I carefully hid my jealousy. It's hard for a child to understand why they get less love. I cried at night, hugging the worn teddy bear my grandmother gave me. My grandmother was the only one who always looked at me with warmth. She lived in another city, so we rarely saw each other. But every time she visited, I was bathed in the warmth my parents couldn't give me. When we started school, the disparity became even more noticeable. Hannah was always praised for her efforts. For example, she made a craft out of cardboard and paper quite ordinary, with many flaws, but my mother exclaimed, "This is a masterpiece, Hannah. How did you make it so beautiful? You're so clever." Meanwhile, I had my first successes in writing. I won certificates in drawing competitions and wrote short stories that my teachers praised. But at home, this only got a cold response. "Well, yes, good job, Rachel, but don't get cocky." There was tension in those words, as if my mother didn't even want to admit I could succeed without their support. I studied hard, avoiding complaints and dramatic whining because I realized it was pointless. One day, when I was about 10, Hannah and I brought home our report cards. I had straight A's, while she had a couple of good grades mixed with C's and B's. My parents looked at my A's, nodded, and said, "Well, you're a smart girl, Rachel. That's expected." But when they saw Hannah's report card, they exclaimed, "Wow, 3 B's. Great job, Hannah. We're proud of you." My heart sank. It felt like the reward for my hard work had been given to someone else. This happened over and over again. As we grew older, the gap in our family became more obvious. My parents believed Hannah needed their attention because she was more sensitive, tender, and vulnerable. But me, in their eyes, I could handle myself. "You'll figure it out, Rachel. You'll find a way," they'd say. At some point, I accepted that I wouldn't get much support from them, but accepting it didn't mean giving up. On the contrary, it pushed me forward, making me even more determined to prove not so much to them, but to myself, that I was worth something. When Hannah and I were nearing graduation, the question of college came up. We both decided to study accounting, which was an amazing coincidence. My interest in numbers, finances, and reporting stemmed from my love for order and precision. I never noticed any particular passion for it in Hannah, but she said, "Well, it's a popular profession. We'll see." My parents took her choice very seriously. They paid for her education in full up front so she wouldn't have to worry about anything during her studies. "Focus on your studies," they told her. But when the conversation turned to my college funding, they said, "You're smart, Rachel. You can probably get a grant or earn some extra money if needed. You'll manage." On one hand, I was hurt that they were spending huge sums on my sister while I had to fight for every scholarship and grant. On the other hand, it gave me another push to keep going. I thought, if they're so sure I'm strong, I'll prove just how strong I can be. I started applying for grants, scholarships, and student jobs to cover at least part of my expenses. We both attended the same college, but our experiences were worlds apart. Hannah lived in a spacious campus room, with our parents regularly sending her money for everything from. I was exhausted, but I realized this was my only way to achieve something. No one was going to hand me what I wanted on a silver platter. My sister never noticed. When we crossed paths in the cafeteria or on the lawn in front of the building, she'd say with a hint of pity, "You look tired, Rachel. Maybe you should manage your time better instead of running around everywhere." I'd smile back, trying not to show resentment or anger because I knew this was my choice. I had chosen this path, and an inner voice kept saying, "Hang in there, Rachel. You have everything ahead of you." Several semesters passed, and I gradually settled in. I realized that, alongside my studies, I needed to think about my career early. So I pursued various internships. I got a position at a local audit firm, where, though I was mostly on coffee runs, copying documents, and sorting papers, I gained invaluable experience in the real world of accounting. Gradually, they let me handle small tasks that required specific skills. I eagerly took on everything. Many students at our college didn't even try to get such jobs, assuming internships were only for those from prestigious universities. But I knocked on doors, asked for a chance, and got lucky. When my first summer in college ended, I learned about an opportunity to study intensively and take some CPA exams early. I realized that if I worked like crazy, I could pass some of the exams before graduation. No one around me believed it was possible for an ordinary student, but I was confident. I had the strength. Around the same time, I met Professor McLaughlin at an elective course he taught on international financial reporting standards. I signed up, though the course was challenging and extensive. On the first day after the lecture, he approached me and said, "Rachel, you have a strong foundation. Where did you study before?" "Well, nowhere special," I replied. "I just read a lot, study, and try to figure things out." "Do you like accounting?" he asked. "Yes, very much. I believe order in numbers creates order in business and in minds." "What a thoughtful way to put it," he said with a smile. "I'm looking for an assistant to help prepare materials and occasionally grade student work. If you're interested, let me know." "Of course I'm interested," I said, thrilled. "I'd be happy to help." Ecstatic about this opportunity, I returned to my room and called my mom, still hoping for some praise to break through their usual cold approval. But she responded, "Well, that's nice, Rachel." Then she added, "Hannah told me she was invited to a party at a professor's country house with a lot of high society people. She's got her own achievements. You're both doing well." I sighed heavily. There it was. I was an assistant to an accounting professor, and my sister was going to a party, but to mom and dad, these were equal successes. Maybe it would always be this way for them. One evening while I was in the library until closing, I received an email with the subject line, "Benjamin Ford Scholarship Information Letter." I opened it, not immediately understanding what it was about. It was a prestigious national program in accounting, awarded to only 5 students across the country each year. The requirements were strict: excellent grades, outstanding extracurricular activities, leadership qualities, professor recommendations, and more. Honestly, I hadn't even considered applying, thinking it was too high a bar. But Professor McLaughlin must have submitted my portfolio himself. He had a habit of recommending strong students without telling them to keep them from getting nervous. The email invited me to submit a formal application because the committee was impressed by a preview of my achievements. I sat in shock, rereading it several times. Finally, I decided I had to try. I didn't tell my parents or Hannah about it. By then, I'd learned my lesson. My aspirations and victories were my own. They wouldn't notice or would dismiss them as insignificant. Why face their indifference again? It took weeks to prepare for the competition. I had to submit documents, write an essay, complete tasks, and secure recommendations. Professor McLaughlin helped, offering advice, reviewing my work, and pointing out mistakes. I gave it everything. Then I sent the application and put it out of my mind for months. Work, studies, internships, and CPA exam prep filled my days. I didn't let myself relax for a minute. 3 months later, after another library shift, I found an email "Congratulations, you are one of 5 winners of the Benjamin Ford Scholarship." I reread it, overwhelmed by joy, pride, disbelief, and excitement. That quiet inner voice suddenly spoke up. "See, Rachel, you can do it. You did it." I closed my eyes, nearly crying from the emotions flooding me. For the first time, I realized no one could ignore me now. It sounds a bit arrogant, but it's what I'd wanted my whole life, to be noticed. Yet, alongside the pride, there was exhaustion. What about my parents? How would they react? Would they even congratulate me? The award ceremony was announced in advance, to be held at a leading university, with representatives from major audit firms, investors, journalists, and professors from across the country. The organizer called and said, "Bring your parents, Rachel. It'll be a special day for them to see what you've achieved." I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to invite them, fearing another cold remark or minimization, but another part, the stubborn inner child, still hoped for a hint of pride. So I dialed home. "Hi, Mom. Remember I mentioned entering a big competition? Well, I won one of the most prestigious national scholarships in accounting. I'm invited to an award ceremony, and they'd like me to bring my parents." "Really?" I heard her raise her voice and call out, "Charles, come here. Rachel's saying something about an award." I picked up again. "The ceremony's in 2 weeks, Friday morning, in another city. I'll check with you about what's most convenient. They want to see you there." "Okay, we'll try to make it," Mom said, her tone suggesting she wasn't sure it was worth the time. I hung up, feeling empty. "Okay," I told myself. "Even if they come, let them see it with their own eyes. Maybe then something will change." But I no longer had the childish hope I once did. I'd grown tough. The day of the ceremony arrived. I got to the university early, wearing my only semi-formal dress, modest, classic black with simple accessories. The other awardees were bustling around, all a bit nervous. We were led into the hall where the ceremony would take place, and told that the university director would announce each name, list our achievements, and present the award. We took our seats in the front rows as the hall filled with guests. I noticed Hannah sitting next to our parents. She wore an expensive dress, a chic handbag on her lap. Mom and Dad looked a bit confused, as if they didn't quite know why they were in such a place. I avoided their eyes to stay focused. I was ready for the most important moment of my life. The ceremony began. The host announced one awardee after another, sharing impressive biographies. One had created a program to optimize tax accounting. Another stood out with international student projects. I applauded each one, trying to contain my excitement. Then it was my turn. The rector stood and said, "The next student, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of resilience, discipline, and independence." Without financial support from her family, she went from working as a cleaner and librarian to becoming one of the best in her class. Her professors call her a person of iron will and determination. Meet Rachel Moore. The audience erupted in applause, and I heard several people stand up. I rose from my seat, a wave of heat spreading through my body. As I walked toward the stage, I turned to the audience and saw my parents' faces. Mom sat with a cold expression, lacking the usual pride in her eyes. Dad looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected things to be so serious. Hannah stared at me with bewilderment, mixed it seemed, with a hint of envy. In that moment, I realized they were truly seeing me as if for the first time. I stepped onto the stage. The rector shook my hand, presented me with an award, and offered brief congratulations. We took a photo, and I returned to my seat amid the lively celebration. I felt as though fate had finally rewarded me for all those years of being overlooked. After the ceremony, not only Professor McLaughlin, but also other professors and representatives from major companies approached me. They congratulated me, handed me business cards, and asked if I was interested in internships at their firms. I smiled, quietly reveling in the moment. This was the reward for my hard work. Suddenly, I saw the rector approach me. He leaned in and whispered, "You've proven that family isn't always the one who helps. Sometimes family is yourself. Don't forget that. All doors are open for you now." I nodded, then noticed my parents and Hannah walking toward me. I sighed, mentally preparing for another cold conversation. "Rachel," Mom said, forcing a smile, "congratulations. You were great, I guess. But why didn't you tell me it was this serious?" Have you ever listened? I replied simply. There was little aggression in my words, just weariness and release from years of waiting. Mom frowned, and Dad started to say something. We always believed you were capable of so much, but we didn't know you needed help. We thought you could handle it yourself. You never asked if I needed help, I said. It suited you to think Rachel could do anything. But sometimes I wanted someone to support me too. Mom looked at Hannah, confused. Hannah stood silently, glancing between me and our parents. Then she tried to interject. Listen, Rachel, I didn't know you were applying for this scholarship. I thought your college was paid for too. Really? I looked into her eyes. Have you ever wondered how I pay for my studies and rent? Has it ever occurred to you that you and I live different lives? Hannah made a helpless gesture. I guess I was too busy with my own life. Exactly. And you were all fine with that. But I don't want to hash things out now. I don't need your approval anymore. I turned my back to them. In books, the main character usually cries in moments like this. But I was calmer than ever. So many emotions swirled inside me. But they weren't about my family. They were about me. It suddenly hit me. This was the moment I stopped trying to earn their love, stopped chasing that childhood dream that one day they'd see how good I am. That evening, the university held a small reception to honor the awardees. Investors, teachers, students, and some parents attended. Mine stayed too. I only crossed paths with them by chance at the refreshment table. A representative from a large auditing firm approached me and said, Miss Moore, we'd like to discuss a possible job offer. We're impressed with your accomplishments and references. Can you come to our table? I glanced at my family across the room. Mom, Dad, and Hannah stood there, embarrassed, looking in my direction, but not daring to approach. I walked to the investors' table, and we began talking animatedly about the future. They mentioned a potential starting position as a junior auditor in their New York office. My dream was to break into a big city, work in a prestigious office, and dive into real audit practice. The next day, there was a scholarship dinner for the recipients, and my parents decided to attend. At dinner, my mother tried to start a conversation. Rachel, we know we may not have been the most attentive parents, but we really do love you and Hannah equally. Maybe we just haven't had our priorities straight. It's not about love, Mom. It's about how I've always felt like I had to earn your praise while Hannah got it by default. I tried and tried, but you didn't see it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm no longer used to asking. Dad sighed and reached out as if to pat my shoulder. Forgive us, daughter. We didn't realize you were struggling so much. I don't want to argue now, just accept that things are different. I'm not angry, I'm just choosing myself. Hannah sat off to the side, fidgeting with her napkin. Occasionally she glanced at me, as if she couldn't believe I was the same quiet Rachel who always got the short end of the stick. I saw confusion in her eyes and a hint of envy, because now I was the center of attention in a room where she thought she belonged. She clearly didn't like it. A week after the ceremony, I accepted the offer from the New York office. Another large firm had called me to Chicago and another to Los Angeles, but I chose New York. I was drawn to the fast pace of the big city and the chance to grow quickly in a challenging environment. I slowly packed my things, preparing to move after the semester ended. Since then, my relationship with my family has dwindled to almost nothing. We occasionally call each other, but the conversations are brief and polite, like, how's work going? Great, I'm working on a project. Okay, well, we're happy for you, and that's it. Mom and Dad have tried to reconnect, but honestly, I no longer feel the need to prove anything to them. Hannah sent me a couple of messages, not to congratulate me or acknowledge my achievements, but to complain that our parents started demanding more independence from her. They look at me and see a student can be self-sufficient, and I found that a little amusing. My example had shaken up their usual world, and Hannah suddenly struggled to meet their old expectations. I'll always remember that moment in the hall when the rector called my name, and everyone turned to look at me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and recognized. I achieved that on my own without money, without favors, without anyone's special treatment. That feeling still gives me the strength to move forward. Even now, when I work for a major company and occasionally hear about new challenges, No challenge feels scarier than the years I spent in my sister's shadow, trying to win the attention of parents who didn't see me as their real daughter. Looking at my life now, I know one thing for sure. Sometimes you stop begging for love and choose to love yourself. That doesn't mean I've become cold or bitter. On the contrary, I feel immense inner peace and confidence. I'm ready to help others who might also lack family support. I want to tell them that anything is possible if you have determination, goals, and belief in yourself. Even if as a child you were told 100 times, "You're smart, you'll figure it out," and given no help, strength comes from our wounds and mistakes. The love we didn't receive can sometimes be the driving force that propels us to great heights. When I graduated and officially received my diploma, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. Apparently, they had other plans. And Mom said, "You can manage without us, right?" I smiled and replied, "Yes, of course I can." A week later, my grandmother called, the same one who had always been kind to me. She said, "I'm proud of you, Rachel. You're a wonderful granddaughter. I wish I could have been there with you, but you know I'm always there in spirit." I nearly cried when she said that because I realized I wanted her to be the one to see me walk across the stage, happier than I'd ever been. But she was old, and the trip would have been too hard for her. Still, her call was the warmest moment of that day, and I was deeply grateful. A couple of months after graduation, as I packed my bags for New York, Hannah showed up. She'd driven to campus in her car, which surprised me since she hadn't visited in ages. She walked in, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to start a conversation. "Rachel, maybe you don't want to. We'll go so far away. Our parents want us to stay close." "Hannah," I replied calmly, "our parents never cared what I did. Now they suddenly want me close. Sorry, but I have my own path." "I'm just afraid we won't talk anymore," she muttered, picking at the edge of her pillow with her fingernail. "We haven't really talked much anyway, Hannah, and you know it." She lowered her eyes and stood up, sighing heavily. For the first time, I saw a kind of childish confusion on her face. I felt like she was unsure of herself. Maybe she realized that her well-being had always rested on being our parents' favorite, and now I'd surged ahead, landing brilliant offers while she was just finishing college, unsure of what she wanted next. "Good luck, Rachel," she said finally and left the room. I stared at the closed door for a few seconds, feeling something strange, not anger or contempt, but a quiet sadness. Once we were little girls, twins who could laugh together without caring who was born 4 minutes earlier or later. But life shaped us differently, and we became so different. I could no longer return to that innocent feeling of we are one. Now we were strangers who happened to share a family. In New York, I dove into a relentless work rhythm. At first, it was tough, 10 to 12 hours a day preparing reports, learning new skills, communicating with clients, mastering auditing nuances, and getting the hang of new programs. But I loved it. I thrived on being in the thick of things, tackling complex problems daily. I was confidently building my career, and I no longer waited for mom or dad to praise my achievements. Why would I need that? I could see the results of my hard work myself. On weekends, I'd walk Manhattan streets, gaze at the skyscrapers, and think about how strange life is. Life can be unpredictable. If my parents had supported me as much as they did Hannah, would I have become so resilient, stubborn, or ambitious? Maybe not. I'm grateful that fate didn't hand me an easy path. It made me stronger and taught me that the most valuable recognition is the one you give yourself. Several years have passed. I've completed my studies, gained experience, and earned a promotion. My parents still try to stay in touch, sending messages like, "How are you doing, daughter? It's a shame you don't visit." I respond briefly, "Everything's fine, thank you." Hannah occasionally appears on social media, posting photos from parties, but then sends me rare messages complaining about how hard it is to find a job. I tell her, "Send your resume to different places, take courses, improve your skills." She gets annoyed, saying, "I find all that so boring." Our paths have truly diverged, but I don't regret that we barely talk. It's not that I hate or despise them. It's just that one day, you stop begging for love and start choosing yourself.